Well, hi again, everyone. Welcome into Unanchored Boston with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch, and as always, we are brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping and where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. Well, we've got a great guest today, and what a timely guest he is with everything that's going on with the Four Nations and the Bruins, et cetera, and the great one and only Bobby Lobel, take it away. All right.
The Melrose Masher. Melrose Masher, UNH. Walk on at UNH. I can go on and on. We could spend 20 minutes talking about his injuries. Then we could spend the next 20 minutes talking about the 5 teams he played for in the National Hockey League. But Andy Brickley, I love you so much. However, it was your wife that I had to call to make sure you get here. Diane is the queen of making things happen. She's the best of all time.
Well, that's, I like to think of myself as, I'm the boss around here in my house.
Oh, yeah, sure, you're right.
And I have to ask her if that's the case. Am I the boss? So, yeah, nice tactic to lean on her to make sure that I would join you guys. But this is like a throwback date for me. This is like late 80s, early 90s, fellas.
Here we are. Hard to believe Lobel and Lynch can actually get on television. Though we do have a lot of help. Keelan and Jim take good care of us. And without them, well, we'd be nowhere. So, Lowe, you're in South Carolina. I'm in Naples. Where were you golfing last week, Brick?
Well, I flew into Tampa. My buddy, Timmy Burke, who works for the San Jose Sharks, he has a place in Sarasota. He's a member at Sarah Bay, which is an old Donald Ross, tremendous golf course. And we were playing in a member guest there on Wednesday, but this was Saturday. So we did some traveling around, and he wanted me to experience a course called Mountain Lake, which he says is the best course in Florida. Now, he has his own standards, but it's in Central Florida, kind of like Stream Song. In the middle of nowhere, but we went over to a hockey game. You had to do a little work, so we went over to the other side of the state as soon as I got there to watch a Saturday night game, last game before the Four Nations, and it was Florida hosting Ottawa. So I had a genuine interest in seeing the game myself, given the fact that the Bruins are actually chasing the Ottawa Senators. So I went to the game with him, even though he was working. I went with my fan hat on, and then we drove up to Port St. Lucie, and then we made the ride in the morning over to the golf course. We spent 2 days at Mountain Lake. And Lynchy, if you ever get a chance, Lobie, if you ever get a chance, you got to check this place out. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in Lake Wales, Florida, and the golf course is spectacular.
Wow.
Well, we thought we had America's guest on last week when we had a Ruzioni, but no.
Oh, no, he trumps me, that's for sure. No doubt about it.
Who was the coach at UNH when you were there?
Charlie Holt.
Yeah.
Charlie Holt. His name came up last week because Ruzioni said that Charlie Holt did not offer him a scholarship. And Holt did admit, right, Lynchy? Did say it was the biggest mistake he ever made. And then Jackie Parker called Ruzioni and said, why don't you come to BU? That's a pretty interesting story, I thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, Michael, the great overachiever, right? I mean, what he was able to accomplish with his career and what he meant to that 1980 team. We're watching the Four Nations, and they're talking about this team and this group of players and the talent that's on the ice, and they think it might be the best group. I point to that 80 Olympic team and what they were able to accomplish, and the fact that they were amateur players playing against professionals. And, we don't have to do a deep dive on that, but it impacted my generation. I was right behind that group of guys. I was on track for the 84 Olympic team. I played in the World Juniors, and I was going to graduate college, and I was an All-American, and it looked like I was going to be on that 84 team. And then you had to make a decision, in 82 or 83, do I want to come out of school early? Do I want to turn pro? And I leaned on those guys, the guys that I knew. Jackie O'Callahan is my cousin. And I love the fact that OC, just to digress a little bit here, coming out of Boston Latin, right? Lynchy, coming out of Boston Latin, he turned down Harvard to go to BU. But those guys were so meaningful, impactful to me in my life and my development, my career. And then to watch that 96 World Cup team, because the next generation after my generation, they were awesome. That group of players, to this point, to me, is the best in terms of skill and talent. And what they were able to do, especially winning those last 2 games against Team Canada in the fashion that they did and the physicality that they played with. And and the pride that they played with. And we're seeing a little bit of that. This isn't a full 18 field. It's only the 4 nations, but you're getting a little bit of that. So I didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but when you talked about Charlie Holt and the fact that I went in there, you mentioned it right off the top, Bob, that I was a walk-on. I was a late bloomer, but Charlie Holt, the impact that he had on me and the teaching that he gave me, I thought he was a brilliant hockey mind that was willing to experiment, especially in the first half of the year, to make us a better team in the second half. And that's usually the way it went. We were always a better second half team.
I got so many questions, Lynchy. I know you do too. And I just want to make one thing I love about Brick is you can really kind of tease him a little bit. You can give him a hard time. But there was when he was with the Penguins, he was traded to the Penguins, and then he was demoted to the American Hockey League team. Why? Because he and another player, Mike Bullard, missed curfew in Montreal. Okay, now it just doesn't sound like you, Brick. So I have to say that Bullard had to be the guy that made you stay out late in Montreal. Like, who doesn't stay out late in Montreal?
A lot of variables here in this story, Lobie. Let's first of all, if you're going to miss curfew, don't be 5 minutes late. Okay, so we checked that box. We definitely missed curfew by a wide margin. We had lost 8 straight. This is the year the Penguins were trying to lose because it was pre-lottery. So if you finished last, you got the first pick, and you know who the first pick was? The savior of the franchise, Mario Lemieux. They wanted to make sure that they got Mario Lemieux. So we were rotating goalies that might have had no business playing in the NHL to make sure that we gave up a lot of goals. Mike Bullard was a 50-goal man. He had status. He was a guy. And I played on a line with him. The year he had 51, I played on a line with him, and it was such a pleasure. He didn't care about the backside of the ice, but from the red line forward, he was as good as it was, and I loved his company. I loved his outlook on life and how much he enjoyed what he did for a living, and probably carried it a little bit too far. But because we had lost so many games in a row, and because I could get sent down without having to clear waivers, it was pretty easy for the general manager, who was Eddie Johnston, by the way. And Eddie traded for me, and he liked me as a person. He liked me as a player. He thought I was a steal in the deal that he made. And it looked that way. I was having a good year. I was putting up points, but he made an example of me. And it was probably the second hard lesson I got in the first 2.5 years of my career.
Well, thank you for filling in the blanks on that story.
Yeah.
I expected nothing else.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say it was the first curfew I missed, but it was the first
one.
When
you got caught. Right.
I got to tell you, the times I mostly playoffs the only time we travel, but you and Beersy got the most golf in during a hockey season I've ever seen anybody in my life. Every place you go, I think before you even look at the schedule, you're looking at all right, what golf course we get here, all right, what golf course we get here, what golf course we get here, and when the equipment bag comes off, your clubs come off too.
No. We don't travel. That's the wrong message to send. When you're a guest on the Bruins plane, even though we both played for the Bruins and we're alum, you don't. Plus, any of the clubs that we use when we do play on the road, they're better than anything that I have in my bag. Lobie's seen my bag. He's seen my club. So as long as they're left-handed, I'm good. But yeah, we do play a lot of golf. We got a trip coming up. We haven't been to California yet, fellas. We're going to go in March. I know there are more important things this time of year for the Boston Bruins than our golf schedule, but that habit still continues. 2011, now that you mention it, even though we only had the regional cables only had 2 rounds at that time. So we had the first series, which was awesome against Montreal, Game 7 at the Garden. And then we had the Philadelphia series when they swept the Flyers after the Flyers had that unbelievable comeback the year before. When the Bruins were up 3-0 and up 3-0 in Game 7 and still lost the series. So that was a nice payback. So that was a fun series to do. But then, even though we were done, I was still part of our coverage pre and post. So I got to travel to the Tampa series and then to Vancouver. And it's June in Vancouver, okay? And we played 4 games up there in that series. They were the number 1 seed. As you know, Game 7 was in Vancouver when Boston won it. So, and we spent a couple extra days because we had time to get back for the parade. So the amount of time we spent in Vancouver, we got 7 rounds of golf in the time that we were in Vancouver. So, because we're usually there in, February, right? We were in Vancouver during the regular season. So it was an opportunity to play golf in Vancouver, which had never presented itself in the past.
And you could play till 11 o'clock at night in
Exactly. Yeah, it wasn't just 18 holes.
All right, let's talk about this 4-nation thing. I mean,
yeah,
hockey is the hardest sport to play. It is the hardest sport to officiate. It is the hardest sport to broadcast. And it's the hardest sport to understand when you can see teammates line up against each other and fight, and then expect them to come back and play on the same team a week later.
Yeah.
This whole dynamic was the most fascinating part of. I mean, things have been pretty boring for the last, including the Super Bowl, for the last 4 or 5 months. It was nothing boring about USA Canada that night, and there'll be nothing boring about USA Canada Thursday night at the Boston Garden. Although I'm sure the Bruins fans will rise to the occasion and show the world how it should really be done in terms of showing appreciation for another nation's anthem. Are you kidding me? I mean, it'll be the boos that came from Montreal will be amplified 3 times when it comes to the Boston Garden. But having said all that, Andy, that's the most fascinating thing to me is the whole dynamic of your teammates lining up against each other, the general manager picking for a Canadian team. There's just got to be feelings involved here.
Oh, yeah. There's just so many ways to come at this, Lobie. First of all, I would put myself in the category of, I won't say I was doubtful, but I was curious, how this 4-nation tournament was going to be received during the season. Was it going to be viewed as just like a placeholder for this year in lieu of the All-Star game? Because the players don't want to play in the All-Star game. There's nothing competitive about it. It's just rub elbows, meet and greet with all those people that invest in the National Hockey League. And the players, if they had their druthers, they probably wouldn't play in it unless it was a bit more competitive exhibition. So I was a little curious as to how it was going to be received. I knew the players would go in. When you have a guy like Marchand going in there, he's all in. He's going to have the buy-in. And you expected the players that once they drop the puck that it would be competitive hockey. Did I expect it to be this nationalistic, this it feels like the Olympics to me, even though there's only 4 teams. And the fact that it's NHL driven, it's NHL governed, it's NHL officialed. So that allows for a much more physical NHL game that you wouldn't get in other international hockey play, correct? And I think we as hockey fans, especially here in Boston, we appreciate that. That's the kind of hockey we like to watch. And if you can get that with the skill level of all 4 teams, and then to get what you got Saturday night in Montreal, and as an aside in Montreal, the booing of the anthem, unacceptable. But, you guys have been there. There's a sense of we invented the game arrogance to that part of the world, and especially from their media. But I have so much respect for the city of Montreal, the people of Montreal, and the franchise of the Montreal Canadiens, even though I hated them growing up. They killed my Bruins every postseason. But I saw it firsthand when I was playing the game, and I saw how they ran their operation. They do everything right up there in Montreal. They do everything right in that building. They do everything right in that franchise as far as recognizing the past. And as I sit here with some of my swag on from the last year and a half with the Bruins celebrating 100 years, the Bruins learned from that. The Bruins did an awesome job over the last year and a half. And I think a team like Montreal, an organization like Montreal, had something to do with that. But that being said, all of a sudden, after I watched game 1, Montreal, Sweden on Wednesday night, I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. I'm going to have to watch these games. It's going to have to be must-see TV. And then what we saw Saturday night at Bell Center, right at the puck drop, was just fabulous stuff. And now you got the dream matchup in the final, right? I mean, this is what they were hoping for. This is what they got. They got the best 2 teams, the top 2 seeds. Each have different styles of play, that who gets to their game first and who sustains it for 60 minutes will be the ultimate champion. And I'm happy to say that I will be in the building and I will be able to see
that
this
was
thing
one,
live in person.
That's one ticket I would like to have. I would.
Yeah.
But I also think, Andy, the booing of the national anthem has a direct impact over the political climate that preceded it.
No doubt. No
yeah,
doubt.
I mean,
Yeah.
no doubt
50,
about it.
yeah, the tariffs, the
51st
51st state.
They did not want to become the 51st state.
Yeah, right. No, I understand. I understand the reasoning for it. I just wish they were bigger than that. And I expect the Boston crowd, to your point, Lobie, that they act accordingly.
Well, you know what? We don't know, but the point is that it'll be one hell of a game. I can say that.
I get a real charge out of the fact that, you know, I mean, I wasn't a fighter when I played. You know, you had to protect yourself, and it was a pretty violent game back in the day. Rules were different. The net front was a war zone. You know, and the game has changed for the better. But what we witnessed, and to think that when you start talking about the games on television, you said how hard it is to do on TV, and it is, and it gets harder because of the pace of play, and the further the way they put you from the arena. You know, like Fred and Derek, they had it made, didn't they, in the old guard?
Yeah, I know.
They had the best seats in the house. You know, but we're up on 9 in every building. You're as far away from the ice. You know, they have to sell everything underneath you. I understand the economics of it. But the way that game started, the 3 fights in 9 or 10 seconds, and TV over the last 25 years have said we want fighting out of the game. Yet everybody, to a man, to a woman, to a fan, loved that hockey game.
You know, plus to hear Bodie Tkachuk have the conversation with his brother, and his brother said, "I'm going first." Was it Bennett that he was after, or what was it? Former teammate, right?
Yeah, well, you know, Bennett's the guy that got Marchand in the playoffs with that.
Right. Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so I wasn't unhappy to see that, nor the result. You know, Bennett's a tough player. He's a good player. You'd want him on your team. He's one of those kinds of guys. You know, he makes big plays at big moments, even though he's not going to put up 100 points. But, yeah, just the fact that they made a conscious decision that this is our game plan. This is the way we're going to go about it. They agreed upon it. It was signed off on. Whether the coaches knew that exactly what was going to happen, I don't know. But the fact that it's led by the Tkachuks. And you know what? I was lucky enough at the tail end of my career. I got a few games in at the end, you know, up in Winnipeg. And I play with Keith. I play with the dad. I play with Walt. And it's just, you know, they talk about the Sutters being the first family of the NHL. I don't know. Those three, man. I know there was, you know, double that when you talk about the Sutters. But the Tkachuks are right up there.
I love the fact that Matthew said, I want him. I'll take it. I'm going out first.
You know, I mentioned that 2011 season. I don't know if you guys remember this, but the Bruins had a game in November against Dallas. And the Bruins started their fourth line, you know, Campbell, Thornton, and Paille. And Campbell had a score to settle with Steve Ott. Ott was lined up on the wing to start the game. So Thornton took the draw. Campbell lined up with Ott. As soon as they dropped the puck, off the gloves came. And Ott got the better of Campbell. And then Thornton said, well, we can't start the game like this. So they dropped the puck again. So Thorny grabbed a guy. And that and absolutely, you know, you could imagine the result of that fight. And then shortly thereafter, there was a play at the blue line. Adam McQuay stood a guy up. They fought. He broke his jaw. And then about 3 minutes later, there was a shot after a whistle. Andrew Ferentz grabbed somebody. Andrew Ferentz. And he fed his guy. Okay, so there's 4 fights in the first less than 5 minutes of the hockey game. And I remember Brad Marchand was on the Bruin bench closest to the Dallas bench. And he was yelling over to them, chirping them, you know. And he was saying, really? Really? This is what you guys want to do? We haven't even gotten to Chara and Lucic yet. You know, and you remember those games. You know, it was a significant game. It gave you a nice window into what that team was all about. You know, all for one, one for all. However you want to play, you're not going to beat us up. In fact, we're going to beat you up, and we're going to outskill you, and we're going to win. And that year was so much fun for me as a broadcaster because it reminded me of the teams I was on in Boston. We just weren't good enough, especially, you know, in 90, 91, and 92. You know, we lose to Edmonton, and then we lose to the Lemieux teams when they were a wagon in 91 and 92 in the semifinals. We were close. But for those guys to witness that in person, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Brick, what do you think is going to happen Thursday night? Now, Boston fans have never needed any cues on how to behave, how to cheer, when not to cheer. will the PA announcer actually have to say something? Please show respect for flag, or they just know how to act?
No, they know how to act. There may be a handful of boos, but it'll be drowned out by the right
Applause.
behavior by the Bruins crowd or the U.S. crowd or just the Garden crowd. But I think that's standard practice now when you're playing any international tournament. That is part of the intro that you say to respect the anthems of both teams. There are times where people make the argument that if it's like the Olympics, the anthem should come after the game and play it for the team that's victorious. I don't know. That's open for discussion, whether you like that idea or not. But as far as the game and how it's going to start, I mean, that's a great unknown. I don't anticipate the same start we saw on Saturday night in Montreal. And the hard part is the players are going to be just so amped up. The emotions are going to be through the roof. And you got to be able to channel it. They were able to channel their emotions in that game against Canada and play a really smart game. I mean, if there's one aspect of a team that I admire most, it's hockey IQ. It's intelligence. You can be the most skilled, and you look at Canada, they might have 4 of the best players in the world when you start talking about McDavid and company, and but both teams are so deep and both teams can get it done. But if you can play and make the decisions, the right decisions, the smart decisions, and make the fewest mistakes, those are the teams that win. But in order to do that, you got to be in control of your emotions. You can't be running around. You can't get out of position to go for a big hit. You can't chase the play. And those are the things that are going to be the difference makers because they're so evenly matched.
Brick, tell everybody what the reason behind this 4 nation and how the reluctance to compete in the Olympics, et cetera, and where we going forward now during this little break in the month of February.
Yeah, I wish, Lynchy, I was a player rep when I was playing, and we were going through turbulent times. We had some work stoppages, necessary work stoppages, and I know much later we lost an entire season, so it got even more severe later on. But at that time, we were trying to get educated as a union, as an association. For years, there was that sense of servitude, that you were a slave to that one team, that one owner. You didn't have free agency until you were 40 years old, and everybody's career was done when they were 28 or 29 or 30. So there was a lot of learning to be done. There was a learning curve that had to happen. And Bob Goodenow was the executive director at the time, and he wanted educated guys, motivated guys. But you needed the leverage, you needed the power, you needed the star players to buy in. So you really had to come together as a group, and it took a hard time. So this was still when pros weren't playing in the Olympics, and if I could add my opinion, I like it that way. I like World Cups. I like international play. I like best on best, but it doesn't have to be in the Olympics for me. I like the concept of rendezvous. Or a World Cup. I already referenced the 96 World Cup and how much I enjoyed that. I loved that. But I'm not sure the impetus behind this event. I said earlier, I thought it was just like a placeholder to get away from the All-Star game, to put some kind of international play tournament together, because they hadn't played NHL players since 2016, I think it was.
Yeah.
The last time that they actually had best on best with NHL players. They opted not to go because of what was going on in the world. They didn't want to go over to Asia to play in the Olympics, but they did want to get back, and they want the NHL players. The players they want to be part of the Olympics. They want to wear that jersey for their country, and today's player, they want to play in the Olympics, even though their allegiance is with their respective teams that they work for. So all that being said, they wanted to put a tournament together. They couldn't put 8 countries. I'm not sure that there were enough NHL players to field teams for the other countries. You knew you could do it for Sweden. You knew you could do it for Finland, obviously for Canada and the United States. So they opted to create this event. And I'm sure there are the David Pasternaks of the world that say, hey, what about me? I would love to be part of that as well. And you can go across the league and, Draisaitl, you'd love to see that guy play. Ovechkin, I'd still love to see him on the international stage. So, there were pros and cons of it, but that's why I said I was a little skeptical at the beginning because, you won this tournament, but it really wasn't against everybody. It's just 4 teams, and there's no double elimination, and it's a 4-game tournament. So all that being said, I think it was, I won't call it a necessary evil, but I think it was put together in order to get the ducks in a row for what they're looking for in the future, which is the Olympics in Milan in next year. And then the World Cup, I believe, will be in 28. So in order to get everything the way they wanted, spaced out the way they wanted it, in order to make sure that the nickels and dimes added up and were what they wanted to be, you had a changeover in the leadership of the association with Marty Walsh coming in. You wanted to create good business between, you got a collective bargaining agreement coming up, so there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of conversations that need to be had. And this is turning into be a win-win. I didn't expect it, but it's turning out to be a win-win for everything that they wanted to get out of this event.
There's no question about it. I have my daughter's down here visiting in South Carolina. It's a Saturday. I got to watch a hockey game at 8:00 tonight.
That's right.
And I'm so glad I did. It's like Sunday night was Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary, and then Saturday it was fantastic. But then being kind of stupid with myself, I'm saying, well, how come the Russians aren't in this? Why isn't there 5? But you explained it. It's a National Hockey League deal.
Yeah.
Run it.
And the Russian thing still is tied to Ukraine, believe it or not. That still becomes an issue. I don't know where the NHL stands on that. Again, I'm not privy to those kinds of conversations, but I still think that's a factor given what's going on in that part of the world. So I think it's a little unfair for the guys that would like this opportunity. They're going to have to wait another year. And if you think about it, the Olympics, you can draw on players that are playing not in the National Hockey League. And I think that's big for the European teams. There's a lot of highly skilled, talented guys that don't want to come over, and work in North America. They have a great life in Finland. They have a great life in Sweden. They're very good players that will make their Olympic teams that were not involved in this tournament this year.
So is this a 4 nations? Is this one and done?
I think it is. Yeah. I think certainly for the foreseeable future, when I talk about Olympics next year and then the World Cup in 28, and the World Cup will have more than four countries represented.
Could they do it like the Ryder Cup? They could do like Europe have a team and
they've tried stuff like that in the past. They had a Young Guns team. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
They had a round robin. You're always open to new ideas and new streams of revenue and what's going to drive the needle, what's going to move the television ratings. How can we sell the game in more markets? I remember going to China with the Bruins. Trying to open up that market. So they're always looking for new revenue streams, and you've seen how I got to give the NHL a ton of credit for how they handled the pandemic. They're able to keep the doors open for the most part. They were able to create social distancing, and even though we hated it at the time, these small crowds where people were allowed to come back into the building, I thought they were able to do a tremendous job to keep the game going, keep playoffs alive, keep having a Stanley Cup champion for the most part. And now you're starting to see the end result when you take a look at the cap. They kept the cap flat when it should have went down.
Yeah.
Right. And then you would have been in real trouble in a cap league when you've already promised guys huge money and the money is, going in the wrong direction. So I thought that was pretty impressive by those that run the finances of the league. And to see where the cap's going over the next 3 years, this league is in real good shape right now. You have 3 lists that jump out at me. 3 lists that go with your name. Teams that you played for, and we'll put in the National Hockey League or the Flyers, the Penguins, the Devils, Winnipeg, and the Bruins. Of course, picked you up after the Devils. Injuries, which pucks to the face, 2 major ones. Yeah.
Leg injury, shoulder injury, rotator cuff injury. So that's another list, and a list of your family members. Great grandfather played for the Philadelphia Athletics, just on, and then your brothers played in UNH and UVM.
Let me,
and then you got a couple others in there.
Yeah, let me address a few of these line item by line item. 10 major operations in my 11 and a half, 12 years that I played. All right. I'm not talking scopes. I'm talking about cut me wide open and fix me. And I've only had 2 in retirement. I had a knee replacement and a hip replacement, and I need a knee and a hip on the other side. So, but you gotta be ready for those. I'm not telling you anything you don't know about me, and you too, Lynch. But you got to be ready for those surgeries because you gotta bust your hump in rehab to get the best results. So you got to have the right frame of mind. And I'm not there right now because I'm able to get around the golf course a little bit. I come from great sports bloodlines, as you pointed out. My great uncle Charlie Brickley. I'm sure you're familiar with him, weren't you, over at Harvard?
One of the greats at Harvard.
And then just in my immediate family, my brother John was a great baseball player. Lynch, you're familiar with him, certainly.
Yeah, see him all the time.
Yeah, he went to Rollins, played baseball. In education was important to my parents and especially my mother. He was a double major. He was a Rhodes Scholar finalist, played professional baseball in Europe. When he wasn't going to make it as a player, he got his master's in sport management, interned with the Texas Rangers. So he's lived the sporting life. He's a baseball guy through and through. My brother George, who went to Trinity, which was D3 at the time, when they started a sports Hall of Fame at Trinity, and he graduated 4.0 in economics. So when they started the Sports Hall of Fame at Trinity down in Hartford, he was the first inductee, and he's still the all-time leading scorer for their hockey team after all these years, and all the changes in the game and how it's opened up. He's still the all-time leading scorer. And his daughter just went into the Hall of Fame. So it's a nice father-daughter situation going on there. My brother Quentin was a full-ride guy that went to UNH after me. And we're lucky to have those genes, but it's what you do with those genes that determine, how good you're going to be. So, I got good lessons early. I had 3 older brothers. They taught me the meaning of sacrifice and learn from everything you do and pay attention to the older guys, the veteran guys, because that's where you learn, no matter how good you think you are. But it all makes me come back to one thing, and that is how lucky am I, right? I grew up here. I was 8 and 10 when they won the Cups in 70 and 72. Everybody of my generation wanted to play hockey. The explosion of hockey the minute Bobby Orr came on the scene and those big bad Bruins, and I dreamed of playing in the NHL. I dreamed of playing for the Boston Bruins. I dreamed about being in the Stanley Cup final, and all that stuff came true. And now here I am making my living the last 25 plus years doing the Bruins games on TV. I should never lose sight of the fact of how lucky I've been in my professional career. And it continues. It continues.
Well, the mere fact that you're here with Lynchy and myself today proves
the pinnacle. I've reached the pinnacle now.
The 2 years you played, your coaches in the Bruins were O'Reilly and Milbury.
I had one more.
Who else?
I had Rick Bowness my last year.
Oh, yeah.
That was the year we went through 55 players. I think Cam played 9 games because of what he was dealing with. We were an average team at best that won more than we lost because, we found ways to win games, and we went all the way to the semifinals. We lost to one of those superpowers in Mario's team in '92. They went on to win the Stanley Cup. So that was a pretty impressive season. I played on the line, and I was having a great year statistically. I played on the line with Rosie Ruzicka and Stevie Lynch, and we were one of the hottest lines in the league. And, of course, there goes my rotator cuff, in November.
Milbury found a way to get you in the Stanley Cup finals, though, didn't he?
It was just, despite all the injuries and despite the fact that we never won the Stanley Cup, my experience in Boston was absolutely spectacular. And even though I had 3 coaches in the 4+ years and we went through a lot of different players, I got to play with great players. I got to play with Ray Bourque, who was, to me, the most humble superstar I ever played with. And I played with Solani and I played with Bobby Clark. I played with Darryl Sittler, if you want to go back far enough. So I played with some great players, but Ray had such a humility to how he went about his business and, the impact that he had on everybody in that room. And I played with Cam Neely, Cam was the type of guy you stayed away from on game day. You just did not want to cross his path because he was so intense, and Terry O'Reilly was the most intense guy in the room, and he was the head coach back in 88, 89. So, the learning experience I had and the culture that was in Boston, because I was coming from Jersey, and we had a special the year before. We lost to the Bruins in Game 7. I don't know if you guys remember, in the semifinals.
Yeah.
That was in 88, and then they lost to Edmonton. But we lost Game 7 at the Garden. We were kind of like a Cinderella team. But that was the first year we ever made the playoffs. It was the first year I was ever on a team that was good enough to play in the playoffs in the NHL. And then I came to Boston, and they had such standing, they had such experience, they had such history, they had such expectation, and they had a way of how you went about your business that still exists today. And it's a tangible thing. It's a real thing. And we're lucky to have that. And I know we can get critical when they don't win as often as we want them to win. And some of the losses that they've had in the postseason when they've had great regular seasons, and it's frustrating and it's disappointing. But what exists in that room and within that culture is pretty impressive stuff.
What would have happened Saturday night with the booing and everything if Harry Sinnen was running the U.S. team? Just what would the scene have been like?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Harry would have made sure that his players responded just the way they responded. Yeah. And he would have had a comment or two post game, if not in between periods. I had my share of run-ins with Harry. I mentioned I was the player rep, and he wasn't a fan of that.
Yeah.
Maybe he thought I was a clubhouse lawyer and I was educating the people that he didn't want educated. But and then you always have contract issues. But later in life, when I spent more time with Mr. Sinden as a non-player and as a broadcaster and as a guy that I was around more socially. I grew to really admire the guy. His knowledge, his ability to articulate that knowledge, and his respect that he has for the sport of hockey and what it's meant to him and what it should mean to everybody within the Bruins organization, I think is untouchable.
Yeah.
I need to do
three things in life: death, taxes, and the first penalty in Montreal goes against the Bruins, right?
That's right. That's right.
I need to do a Cold Springs RV mention. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you go camping, Brick, but it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful pastime. You have two daughters, and I don't know if they, that ship may have sailed. Who knows? I don't know. Cold Springs, I have two, and that ship has sailed. Cold Springs RV has the latest in pop-ups and travel trailers, fifth wheelers, motorhomes, and so much more. So go freely browse their full lot and tell them Lobel and Lynch sent you, and you can shop now for the best selection of 2025. Old RVs mean freedom. Good friend of mine, his name is Phil, met this woman, her name was Jackie. They had separate campers, and they camped in a campground in Raymond, New Hampshire, pretty much side by side. And the best part about it is if it didn't work out, one of them could pull out at midnight and never be seen again. No, that's all about freedom. That's what camping means. Freedom. Freedom.
You gotta have an exit. You gotta have an exit plan.
Gotta have right. Freedom. Camping brings an exit plan. Absolutely.
We introduced the girls to camping when they were young. I think like any young parents, you want them to experience the wilderness and survival skills. And I came from a family, there were 5 boys, and we were all Boy Scouts. We did our share of camping. And then we had this grand idea later in life. I had a bunch of buddies that were spread out all across the United States. And when the hockey season would end, we'd want to do something. We're all baseball fans as well as, hockey fans. And we wanted to do a golf trip where we would get an RV, we'd all fly to one place. Maybe it was like Cincinnati, we'd get an RV. Each guy would take one day. It was his turn to be the designated driver. We'd spend the day playing golf. We'd go to a ball game in that city that night, and then we'd go to the next city. And that whole area of the United States, you can catch a lot of games in pretty much close proximity to one another, but we never made the trip. And, time has passed.
Oh, wow. That was too bad.
I know, it would have been great. So we would have had golf, baseball, and a hockey fraternity of guys, to share that. But we never did it. The other thing, too, that when you mention RVs, Chief Johnny Busick, he had an RV that he drove from Boston back to British Columbia, back and forth every single season.
Really?
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Beersy and I went out to visit him one July because he wanted us to come out. What a piece of property he has up there, something that he bought when he first turned pro. And, he's from Edmonton, so it's kind of his part of the world. And he had a place, multi-acre place, and it was right in between the Rocky Mountains and the Selkirk Mountains, I think. And it was on a lake that was 100 miles by 5 miles wide. He had a boat. He had a 73 Thunderbird that he picked us up in the airport in, But what it was spectacular, you know, and there's the RV, you know, he had just gotten home like July 1st when we showed up July 6th, you know, so.
Was he from Red Deer? Is that where he's from?
I no, it's a town. It's kind of pronounced, it's like a Cranston, but that's not it. It's some Creston, I think. I think he's from Creston, BC, if I had to guess.
That's close to Red Deer.
But what a part of the world, you know. I mean, we think we have big trees around here, you know.
You go to Red Deer and you take a left, and then
yeah, exactly.
All right, so
I remember Beersy telling me after he got traded, he was in Tampa. He got traded to Edmonton, then he was coming home for the summer from Edmonton, and he asked, "How do I get out of here?" They said, "Well, you take, I don't know, Yellowknife Parkway, and when you get to Winnipeg, hang a right." You know?
So here's the big question, Andy. This is the Lynchy question of the day.
Okay,
right.
Setting him up to lay it on him.
So you know how John Madden didn't like to fly, so they had a Madden cruiser. Well, Cold Springs RV is in the process of building a Lobel Lynchy cruiser. This is going to be spectacular. And we're going to give each one of our guests is going to get to use it for a week. All right. Now, you've already had your fantasy trip, which you never made with all your buddies. All right. So now you have to pick one person that you can drive from the South Shore to the West Coast. We'll fly you back. One person is going to ride shotgun. It can be man, woman, can be alive, deceased, it can be a hockey player, baseball player, it can be a politician, musician, somebody you want to ride cross country with that's going to ride shotgun with you and have a conversation. Who would it be?
Probably Humphrey Bogart.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I'm a huge Turner Classic fan. I spend a lot of my downtime when I'm not in a rink or preparing for a game or going to one of my kids' events or something. I spent a lot of time watching old movies, and I had a life-size poster of Humphrey Bogart on my door in my room in college, back in 1980, and I've been a fan of his. I love the fact that he went to school here locally. I loved his persona. I loved his life. Even though it was marked with some serious controversy, and I like that generation. Like I said to Nesson one time, and this isn't really apples to apples, but I said to Nesson one time when they were looking for programming, I said we should do a home and home alumni game, Bruins Blackhawks, and we travel by train like they did back in the day. And now you could have all that footage when you're traveling by train in the bar car or wherever you want to have with some of the greatest that ever played for both those franchises. And that's what reminds me of, that era, the Bogart era, and the movies and Hollywood and what it was like. And I would be fascinated to have a conversation with Humphrey Bogart for that length of time.
How would you? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike.
No, that's a first Lobel, right? We've never heard Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, first one.
Yeah, didn't he go to school in Andover?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if he made it through. He might have been asked to leave if memory serves me correct, but and then that love affair that he had that, even though he was married at the time, the love affair that he ended up having, Lauren Bacall, was, unbelievable. I mean, those stories are unreal, and that stuff piques my attention. It's something that I would never, ever, ever have an opportunity to experience,
Well, I think Lauren Bacall might have liked you.
What's that?
I think Lauren Bacall might have liked you.
I was home the other night. I was by myself. My wife and daughter went out to see their sister and spend some time together. So I was home alone with my daughter's little dog. And I was like, all right, now they're taking a big chance leaving the dog with me. I'm not really great with pets, but you know what came on? Casablanca came on. So, I educated little Griff, the dog, on what was happening. So he seemed to enjoy the movie.
See, these are things you don't get from Nesson or TV 38. You have to go to the Lynchy Lobel podcast on Unanchored Boston. These are things we bring this out in the guests. Yeah. And who would have known?
Yeah. I mean, look at his list of credits. I don't know if you guys are with me on this genre or
go ahead.
The film noir and all that stuff and the characters that he played, no matter what it was, spectacular, absolutely spectacular.
What was the same, or I should say, what was the difference, if there was one, in the hockey players back in that era that you were referring to that you love so much as opposed to today?
Uh, they took nothing for granted, and we weren't like the generation before us that had to work in the off season. We were making enough money, but the money didn't corrupt, and we weren't wealthy enough to live downtown Boston, and we didn't just take everything for granted, and we weren't surrounded by posses, and it was more of a blue collar sport, and I think the teams that are playing today that have that unity and that oneness and that locker room where it's palpable are special, because I felt like we had that no matter where you played. I played on some bad teams, and you would think that would lead to in locker room finger pointing or blaming. It didn't happen that often in my experience. Maybe it happened other places, but I think the athletes of that time had such an appreciation for the commitment that was made within families. And I think that still exists today, but I think it was more of a real thing back then. And there were fewer teams. There were the doors weren't open to the foreign players as much as they were now. When I broke into the league in 1982, it was less than 5% American. You were truly a minority, and you had to fit in, and you had to figure out how to fit in, because you were taking somebody's job, some other Canadian kid's job, and you had to let them know that you were all in and that you had one another's back. And I think a lot of guys experienced that. I certainly did. And that's what I appreciated about the athletes that I played with at my time. And I think the teams that have that now are the teams that you see that are the elite teams, along with the skill level. But yeah, I don't know. That's the thing that jumps out at me the most. When we get together, and I don't skate anymore. I haven't skated in 6 years, and I miss it. But when you get together with the guys that you shared the ice with and you shared the locker room with, that's special. That's special, and I think that's why we still get together. And I think that's why the Bruins alumni is so strong. Bobby Sweeney does a great job. Frank Simonetti, who's running the alumni hockey team now, with Nifty moving on and retiring. It's such a great brotherhood, and that stems from, I think, the people that they were and the price that they paid to get where they were, because it was tough to get there back then.
Interesting.
So we always ask this question, and people, Bob gets this question, I get it all the time. Who are the best guys to deal with, Mike? And I always say, hockey's number one, and they're so far ahead of everybody else. There's nobody in second place.
Right.
Why are hockey players the most generous, the most giving, the most charitable, the nicest? Compared to the other sports, what is it?
Really down to earth guys.
Yeah. Do you have a theory on it?
Well, I have a theory that originally most of them were from Canada, and I thought the Canadian people were more respectful of authority than the American people were. When I went up to Calgary in '88 for 2 weeks, that really opened my eyes up here, how polite people were and how respectful they were. And so I'm stabbing in the dark for the answers here, and that's one of my theories.
No, I think that's a good point to be made, and I agree with that. I don't know. You could probably point to socioeconomic reasons, but then you look at some of the other sports and say, well, they had it tougher in terms of their status in life, in terms of how much money was in the family. But because I think the sport has taken on a more wealthy, you have to have money to play hockey these days. It costs a lot of money to play hockey.
Yeah.
Go into a sporting goods store and try and buy a stick.
Yeah.
But so I don't know if that's a factor. I agree with you. Like I just said, it was 95% Bay or 90% Canadian when I came into the league, and a lot of those guys, they were farmer background that had long work days, and they understood the sacrifice. They had to travel great distances. They needed the commitment from their parents and their families. It was a way of life. It was a culture, and they're just generally nice people north of the border. And I made fun of the Montreal arrogance, but that aside, I agree with that, and I think it starts there. I really do. But now we have people from all walks of life playing the game of hockey. Yet that's still a common thread. You're still going to get those guys that are the outliers. That maybe are a little less respectful and a little bit less fun to deal with, a little less understanding, a little less giving, but that's to be expected. That's going to happen. But I think I just think they just have a good handle based on how they were taught. When you come in, the torch that was passed, you ask Ray Bourque, the torch that got passed to him, the lessons that he learned when he came in, from the Brad Parks, from the Terry O'Reillys, from the Wayne Cashmans, like if you learn, integrity and respect from guys like that, you pass it along and it just continues down the line. And I think that's a big piece of it as well.
I mean,
they're not looking to be their own brand, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they are, maybe I'm out of touch, but it doesn't come across that way.
I mean, there's nobody more down to earth than number 4, Bobby Orr.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, but can you see Michael Jordan being like that? No, all due respect, no. Can you see the best player in their sport compared to Bobby Orr? No, because he's like everybody else is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if that's the standard bearer, how do you deviate from that? If you want to, especially if you want to be one of the best players in the game, and being the best player in the game means you have to have that humility. At least I believe that's a big piece of it in order to be, on that Mount Rushmore of who are the best athletes in sport, in terms of to deal with.
I just want to go quickly back to Thursday night, the upcoming game at the Boston Garden, or TD Garden, USA, Canada. You think as being a sportscaster, I'd know the standings and who wins and if whoever wins that game, what do they win? And, if Canada, if they beat the USA, do they win? Even though they lost to the USA the first time? What the hell? What's the program here?
Well, I think Canada needs it badly. I think they need to win this tournament to put them in that slot that they feel that they belong in.
But did they win? Did they win the tournament by winning the game? Is that?
Yeah. But I think there's such a determination and a statement that wants to be made by Team USA, especially with this generation of players. They truly believe that they are the best, and I love that about them. And it makes for fabulous theater, and it should make for great television, and it should make for great storylines. One of the storylines that does concern me, because I am pro-US, obviously, is the injury situation.
Yeah.
We don't know the health of the players that haven't been playing, that didn't play yesterday, and are they going to play, and how healthy are they going to be if they are in the lineup? And that's a concern for me. I already mentioned McDavid and McKinnon and McCarr and Crosby. They have unbelievable, maybe the better players if you go.
Yeah, like Sean McDonough said, it's almost unfair. I can remember. I've never heard an announcer say that about one team playing. It's almost unfair.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the U.S. team can get it done by the depth of their roster and the fact that everybody's going to play and the intelligence that they can play with. I love their coach. I don't know how well Mike Sullivan. I think he does an awesome job. It's been a tough year for him. I mean, we think we have it tough in Boston this year because we've been so used to being in a playoff spot by now over the last decade or so, for the most part. It's been an unbelievably hard year for Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, and they obviously appear to be sellers because they've already sold. But he's a fabulous coach, and to put a team together in that short order and have them play like a team and check their egos at the door and be willing to do whatever it takes because that's how much they care, that's how much it matters. But I think the Canadians feel the same exact way, and I think that makes for great hockey, and I think that's why you saw what you saw Saturday night at Bell Center. And the expectation is the same. I don't think we're going to get let down no matter how it goes. But this is more than bragging rights. This is like stature. This is like we are the best nation of hockey players in the world at the highest level, and that's what this is all about. And you have the best two, and you have the best two teams.
Being able to create that in 4 games.
Yeah.
Really, 4 nations. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and it's been coming for a long time. It's been coming for a long time. They haven't had this in a while. So, again, I go back to that I was concerned or curious as to what it would look like, and I got turned right around after the first game, and then what we saw Saturday. Now I'm all in. I love this. This is great, and I didn't really appreciate how much it really meant to these guys until I decided to watch these games, and it's just been. And I love the fact that it's ending in Boston. Tremendous.
So if you're Don Sweeney, are you calling up Mike Sullivan and saying Charlie McAvoy's not playing?
I don't think he would have that clout, being affiliated with the Canadian squad. I don't think he has any juice with the Americans.
That's just another thing. The crossover, as Sweeney's the GM of the Canadian squad, the crossover is just bizarre.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
I mean, what if he left one of his deserving players off the Canadian team? Are those guys going to be upset at not talking to each other for the rest of the year? Well, I'm just saying.
It's a fair question. I mean, let's fast forward to the trade deadline. The Bruins have made acquisitions in the last half dozen years where players would come in where, Marchand might have slew-footed him, or he might have licked his face, or he might have, hit him behind the play with an elbow or something. And now that player's coming to join you to try to help you win the Stanley Cup.
That's right. That's the most interesting dynamic of the whole thing.
It is. Now they got to be teammates and have one another's back and let bygones be bygones. But can it really? Can it really be that case? Like Marchand was playing left wing with Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett knocked him out of the playoffs for 2 games a couple of years or last year. These are the things that you got to deal with, and they're not easy. It doesn't happen like in an instant. You gotta work. You gotta work through.
Game, laugh at each other and point and say, "I got you there," and well, let's go out and have a beer, and I'll see you in 2 nights.
No, because any one of those hits could end your career. When you think about it.
Hey, Brick, let me just detour a little bit here. Have you spoken with Jack Edwards at all? And do you know how he's doing?
All right. I saw Jack in person at Sean McGrail, his retirement party that we had maybe a month ago. So I saw him in person. It was great to see him. He looked great. Still had the cough going. He's still sporting the long locks. Spent a lot of time in Vermont. He's an avid skier, so he's in and out of the trees up there in Vermont. Hopefully he avoids them. No change in his physical status. Still passes all his cognitive tests. There's nothing wrong with his brain. He just can't get the words out from time to time. But he's in a really good place. He's happy. The way Nesson treated him, the way the Bruins honored him, I think really helped in his transition into retirement. There was never a guy that I've come across that had such passion for the game, for the team, for the sport, and for everything that's involved. When I watched him in the parade, I sat beside him on one of the duck boats in the parade, and the outpouring of love from the fan base. I know everybody's in a good mood. You just won the Stanley Cup, but everybody, and the signs that they had, the sayings that they had quoted on the signs, and just the love and admiration and the appreciation they had for Jack during that parade, to me was, and I'm glad Nesson saw it. I'm glad the Bruins saw it. I'm glad I saw it, and I'm glad Jack saw it. So it was a nice run we had for nearly 20 seasons, and I was fortunate enough, lucky enough, and it's a lengthy answer to say he's doing good. He's in a good place, one of a kind, and I've said this 1,000 times, and you guys would appreciate this. The word he hates most in the English language is vanilla. He will never be vanilla.
Good one.
He was born to do what he did for the last 20 years. Did you agree?
His dream job. He was such a Bob Wilson fan growing up in New Hampshire, and and he was tired of being in studio. He was tired of working for ESPN. He wanted to be in the game. He wanted to be in the action. And when the Bruins put all the games on one station, which was a very smart move, got away from 38, put everything on Nesson. Nesson went basic cable, wasn't a pay-per-view station anymore, a premium station. And they wanted one broadcast team. And I was fortunate enough to get the in-game, and they moved Gordy Kluzak into the studio. And then it was an open bid for who's going to get play-by-play. And, it could have been Dale, could have been Dave Shea, could have been whoever was doing games at the time. And they brought in Jack, and I think it was a great decision.
Yeah, he's one of a kind. I worked with him at Channel 5 for 3 or 4 years, and He was unique. I mean, you get ready for the colored pencils and pens and everything else, and the briefcase all organized, and everything has to be just so. And but that's Jack. Let him be. Just let him be.
Not to make this any longer the conversation, but my first time meeting Jack, I was at UNH, and he had one of his first jobs. I think he was working at a station in Concord, New Hampshire, and he came to UNH to do a story on a two-sport, athlete star that was me, because I played baseball and hockey, and it was baseball season, and he came to do an interview with me and get some B-roll, get some footage or whatever, and then do an interview with me in between doubleheaders. That was the first time I met him. Okay. And then I'm playing for the Bruins, and Lobel, you mentioned one of my leg injuries. I had this myositis ossificans in my adductor. They took out a fist piece size of my adductor. They had to reroute my femoral artery because it was squeezing me to death. And it looked like my career was over. And Diane says, what are you going to do? Apparently you're not invincible. What are you going to do when you can't play anymore? She says, call one of your friends in the media and see if you can go shadow them for a day and see what they do, see if you like it. I reached out to Jack because I knew him a little bit, and he was the weekend anchor, I think, at 7 at the time, perhaps. Channel 7. Might have been with you guys, Lynchy, but I went to see him on a Saturday, and I watched him work for 4 or 5 hours. And then you guys at the time had, how much time did you have? Like 12 minutes?
Yeah, like 9 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was something awesome, right? It was something really good, not like today, right? So, and I watched him, and then he had to prioritize, and he leaned on those interns that were watching the sporting events, and it was in the spring, so there was a lot going on. Baseball season had started, the Masters was going on, NHL playoffs were starting. Like there was a lot to consume and a lot to prioritize and a lot to write about. And it was like network news, building up to that, the peak of when you go live, that red light would come on. And I watched him write, and I watched him perform. And I went home, and my wife said, how was it? I said, it was fascinating. She goes, something you're interested in? I said, absolutely not. First of all, there's too much writing involved, and, I wasn't very good in English back in the day. So.
Hey, let me do a quick spot right here before we'll let you go, Brick. Hey, if you're looking to get a new car, new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our good friend George Gray, the big wheel we call him, at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know that George Gray will treat you right. They're family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you can trust as well. Go see the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. He's a big fan of yours, Brick, a big fan of the show, and we're great, so supportive. There's George right there with there's two greats right there. The big wheel, George Gray, and number 4, Bobby Orr, right there. We get some shots of Brick in a couple different uniforms, don't we, Bob?
We do. We have to just have our people. There we go.
There we go. Oh, look at the coif right there, Brick, on the upper left. That's with the Penguins, right?
Yeah. Penguins, Jets, Devils. The one on the bottom right there, Springfield Indians.
You look like Brewski, the one in the Devils.
Yeah, obviously I didn't know it was picture day, and I had been out late the night before, so I kept the hat on.
Oh, there you are, Brick.
Yeah, that's Lobel. You recognize that? That's Granite Links.
I do recognize that. I've seen you up there many times.
Yeah. Good thing they didn't show me in mid-swing. That wouldn't have been a very pretty picture. No, but you know what? I think back.
Hey, there you go. Basic guy.
Look at that. Perfect. But I think back to you guys and our interactions back in the day, and doing Sports Final with Bobby, and I remember doing interviews, especially when I first came to Boston with you, Lynch. You'd be at the Garden on game day from the bench. You know what I mean? Yeah. We weren't in the hallway. I loved that. I absolutely loved that. That was great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The hockey players never said no. Plus, you had Nate and Frankie Vona just lining guys up, and you just sit there and they just feed you guys left and right. It was so good. We knew how good we had it, but it was pretty good.
And I remember when I was playing when Bobby brought up a story way back at the beginning of the conversation when I was in Pittsburgh, but then he went to the curfew route. I thought you were going to bring up my penalty shot that made one of your what did you call them back in the day?
Sports spotlights.
Yeah, so I didn't have it in my own sticks, so I'm making up my excuses right now.
I want to
didn't
hear
have any
this.
of my own sticks. I had to borrow one of my teammates' sticks, a Brian Maxwell stick, and it had an unbelievable heel curve. And I was a toe curve guy, like a Messier curve, at the very end of my stick. It was just kind of hooked at the end, and most of the blade was straight and flat. So now I get a penalty shot against Murray Bannerman. I think it was Chicago. I'm awarded a penalty shot. I got hauled down on a breakaway, and I got this stick, and there's no way I can go to my backhand because the curve's just like ridiculous, right? So I already had my mind made up. I can only go forehand, which I don't like. So I come in, I pump fake, I get him to commit, I pull it around him, I got the net, and I'm at an angle. I'm below the dot, but I got the net, and I just try to throw it up top, and it went over the crossbar, over the glass, into the crowd. And this is pre-cell phone.
That's why you made the show, Andy. That's why you made the show.
I was getting made fun of on Channel 4.
No. If the puck had gone in, it'd have been just another penalty shot.
That's right.
Well, do I apologize now, or it's been a long time?
No. I should have buried it.
It's amazing how you remember this. This was years ago, and you remember that one moment. Of course.
It might have been my 15 minutes, as it turns out.
No. I'm sure I had something nice to say about it. Yeah. Bricky did a great job today. It was really great having you.
Oh, you guys make it so easy, and it's always a pleasure to catch up with you guys, whether we're talking sports or anything else for that matter.
Yeah.
I'd like to do it, face to face one of these days.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is a good way to do it, and sometimes it's the only way we can do it today. But
yeah, it is. But
certain settings are fun when the three of us are together. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So much
fun. Have fun Thursday night.
Yeah. You guys have a chance to come in or no? Oh no, you guys are different parts of the world.
I'm in Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina.
Yeah.
It's 78 degrees right here. I'm wearing a bathing suit and t-shirts going on in about 30 seconds.
Nice.
Shut up.
See, we can say shut up now. We never could do any of this stuff before when we were on. We have 3 minutes at Channel 5, Channel 4, and in and out, and now we can say anything, talk as long or as short as we want.
Well, I won't make you jealous because we still get the 4 seasons around where I'm at. So,
Rick, have a great time. Thanks. Say hi.
Great to see you, Lynchy. Thank you so much.
Diane, thank Diane for getting you.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Brick. Andy Brickley. And remember, Humphrey Bogart, one of the great picks of all time. Humphrey Bogart. That was a great one. And make sure you follow us. There he is right there in a Bruins jersey.
He's looking at you, Lynchy.
All right, pal. Don't forget to follow us at unanchoredboston.com.